All right, hello once again, Jeff Scott of Rankin Technical College. And as part of the Rankin Technical College AWD 1000 Web Development Technologies course, I've been going through and creating a series of video presentations that are based off of the Mozilla Developer Network, or MDN, series called Learn Web Development. So far, I've gone over all of this getting started with the web, so I've gone over all of that. I've gone over the 3 sections on HTML structuring the web, so the intro, the multimedia and embedding, and the tables. I am in the CSS styling the web section, and I've gone over the first steps, and I'm on the last part of organizing your CSS, which is right here. So, as it says, as you start to work with larger style sheets in big projects, you'll discover that maintaining a huge CSS file can be challenging. So in this particular section, they talk about best practices for writing CSS. And again, this is best practices as far as they're concerned. I'm not saying I disagree with any of it, but you may pick and choose because there might be things in here you agree with and maybe even other things in here that you don't agree with. All right. Tips to keep your CSS tidy. Does your project have a coding style guide? Now notice it says have a look at the CSS guidelines for code examples. So let's look at these. You know, everything. I have worked for companies before that when I had to program in a certain way because they had their own guidelines. Now these are very general or generic in nature, but you'll find some really good information in here. All right. Keep it consistent. I've often told my students that start to develop your own style, your own way of doing things. And even if it's not the best style in the world, even a bad style, as long as it's consistent, is better than no style at all or better than an inconsistent style. All right. Formatting readable CSS. As it says, some developers like to put their stuff in like this. Others like to do it like this. I prefer this way. I think it's much easier at a glance to see what is what. You may or may not agree with that. You've got to work with what makes the most sense to you. As it says there, CSS doesn't mind which one you use. Comment your CSS. Be liberal with the use of comments. At a minimum, as I showed you in the example here, I like the way that they took everything and at least took the sections and set them out. What I'm going to try to do when we start to create our own website is I'll have something at the top, all right, that might be, maybe we'll have something that will be called like utilities, something that we might use in more than one area, all right? Then we might have stuff that we're going to use, we start to break our document down. And what are we going to use in this section as opposed to this section or this article or this whatever? And, or on this page, and break stuff down like that. You want to be able to, at a very quick glance, see what goes with what. So notice, again, general styles, typography, etc. All right. You may have used CSS property to get around older browser incompatibilities, or you did something, maybe you even put in what would be referred to as a hack to try to make things work a little better. You put in comments in a document for 2 reasons. One is if you are going to create something, but someone else is going to end up maintaining it, you want to put comments in there so they know why you did certain things. The other reason is you do it for you. So you also put some comments in there so if you come back at a later time, you can figure out why you did something. So again, creating logical sections, and there's different ways you can break this up. They're showing an example. I'm not saying that they are showing the right example or the best example. They are showing an example of what you can do. All right. So they've taken their body and they've broken down their general styles. After the general styles, they've got them like this. what I tend to typically do is a lot of times I start to lay out the HTML on the page, then come back and add the CSS. So my document looks pretty bad to begin with, but then I can lay it out and kind of start putting some stuff in the order in which it appears in the document. All right. Avoid overly specific selectors. All right, so what they're saying here is, wow, do you need all this stuff? This applies, as it says, the rule to a paragraph with a class of box, but it has to be inside of an article that has a class of main. Do you need all that stuff? And maybe you do. But if you don't, make it as simplistic as possible. All right. Break large style sheets into multiple smaller ones. If you've got a site that's got maybe 100 pages on it, chances are you're not going to be able to put everything in one file, or that file is going to be thousands of lines long. All right, so what you'd want to do is break it up. On a page basis, I don't know. On whatever basis makes the most sense. It says in particular in cases where you have very different styles for distinct parts of the site, you might want to have a style sheet with the global rules and then other style sheets for specific rules. All right. Now there's other tools, as it says, that can help, and I don't know if they mention it in here, but there's even something that's referred to as you can minify your CSS. Now we haven't talked about this, and we probably won't spend much time on it, but if I go out to jquery.com, jQuery is a JavaScript library that I can download in different ways. I can download an uncompressed version, which looks like this. Don't worry about what any of it means. It doesn't really matter. But I can also download a compressed version, which looks like this. So all unnecessary white space has been removed. Why might you want to do that type of thing? And you might want to do that type of thing for your CSS because there are minifiers that you can use for CSS. Why? So that your page loads faster. All right. It says here, most of the approaches that you will encounter owe something to the concept of object-oriented CSS. The basic idea is to separate your CSS into reusable objects. So they give some examples here on how that could be used. And it says you could create one pattern called media that would have possibly all the stuff in there that you're going to put in for your media. I don't know if it's media queries or what. But the bottom line is there's different ways that you can break this up. I had never seen this before just looking about OOCSS. I have seen BEM before, block element modifier. In BEM, as it says, a block is a standalone entity, such as a button, a menu, or a logo. An element is something like a list item, a modifier, etc. It says you will be able to recognize code that uses BEM due to its extensive use of dashes and underscores. It's widely used in larger web projects, and as it says, there you go. There's an article, BEM 101 on CSS tricks, which is a great place, again, to learn more stuff about CSS in general. And there's other ones. I'm not going to run through those right now. Another way to organize CSS, as mentioned here, is to take advantage of some of the tooling available for front-end developers. Preprocessors and post-processors. We don't really have much time in here to get into something like Sass, but as it says, the author says there that they will briefly explain a little bit about what Sass can do. Sass starts to take CSS, and instead of making it just a styling language, it does make it more of a programming language. You can create your own variables in Sass and basically have them incorporated into your CSS itself. So notice in here, we've got a base color. All right, and now we use it in here. Why? Who cares? I mean, or should you care? Well, it can make your code a little bit easier to read because you might have a base color, a primary, a secondary, etc., and you can set them up like that. All right. The author says that they mentioned previously that one way to organize CSS is to break down style sheets into smaller ones. When using Sass, you can take this to another level and have lots of very small style sheets, even going as far as a separate one for each component. And then you can use the use basically and add them in. All right. Now, a nice way to set this up, and this isn't the only way, but it says a simple way to try out Sass is to use Codepen. You can come in here and you can build code or pens, and I think at least that JSBin supports this as well. That's one thing that we're going to end up using in ours. All right. That's it for this part of the section. So we have now gone through all 12 of these. So we've gone through everything in this particular module. What does that mean? That means that we have now gone through the first steps and the building blocks. So next, we'll be styling text. And as you notice, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different lessons in there. So I'll come back with a styling text overview in just a couple minutes.